One of the things that we're doing is if you want to, large employers, really large companies don't have any problem figuring out how to get interns, right? But smaller, mid-level companies, they just don't have necessarily the wherewithal because they're busy running their company. But they need interns as well. So we're trying to figure out how to set up one internship process where you go and fill out one application, we have someone walk you through it, and that goes into every university. And so as best we can, we're trying to figure out how to simplify the process of accessing expertise within the university system. And I think probably we could all do a better job of figuring out how, like, for example, this connection between the universities and Mark's job bank. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer, but you would think that we were asking for a naming of a firstborn child in many cases. So I think there are lots of things that I think there are lots of good things that we're doing right. Communication is probably one of the areas where we really need to improve and make better connections.
Jack?
First of all, I want to echo the thought. There is a lot of really good partnership as well as results coming out of Mississippi's various different programs, the ones that you just mentioned. The addition that I'd say is that the ability to look at those results with the longitudinal data system that Dr. Parisi discussed is a real plus. You can see where different pieces of the system contribute. Maybe a way of thinking about this is how do you get from good to great? I'm not sure. I'm afraid that that's a little bit too convenient. I actually think that we are in a new era of challenge in terms of where the economy is going. In terms of, as you're saying, small companies, who are the job creators? It's the small companies across the South. If you look at Mississippi, it's the same story. What's the environment? Well, we're starting to win on energy costs, we're starting to win on transportation, but there's still tremendous global challenge in terms of costs for companies. So how is it that it's possible to move from where Mississippi is now to building a system that crosses all those boundaries and gets at the company's needs as well as the needs that others have talked about in terms of the individual citizens of the state? And I think there are a few things that are important. Number one, I would say enshrine in policy some goals, that everything everyone does is about both moving people to those family-sustaining jobs you talked about and improving business competitiveness. Those are not mutually exclusive alternatives. Actually, the way you do one is by doing the other, especially if you look at the long term and how much of Mississippi's workforce is not currently engaged in looking or working. Number two, it seems to me that there's some operating principles that should be supported by policy and adopted widely. First of all, decisions made based on labor market intelligence. We all decide things based on where's our money coming from, what's the politics. I could go on and on, but that's not going to meet the needs of the companies and the people of Mississippi. So based on labor market intelligence, both company need and individual need, based decisions on what needs to happen. Second operating principle, allocate funding and capacity where there are emerging and current needs, and withdraw it where those needs are gone or have been solved. There's not all the money in the world. Using that money as efficiently as possible is very important, and it is very hard to do that. Third of all, that alignment thing I talked about before, having from the top down, from the governor's office on down, the call for these kinds of solutions in terms of sharing systems, but across all the systems. And particularly, I would say, to meet the needs at a regional level of the key industries in the state. I think that's where you get the most bang for your buck. And lastly, accountability. Accountability for effectiveness, I think there are four domains. First of all the stuff that Department of Employment and Security has to respond to, you know, who's getting jobs, what are the pay rates, are they staying on the job, et cetera. Second of all, what about employers? You know, what's, for instance, the ratio of people coming over to those that are hired? Or other metrics that make a difference in terms of employer cost and things like the extent to which people stay. Important things for employers. Thirdly, partnership. If we don't measure it, we won't manage it, and it won't happen. If you want partnership across a number of different constituencies that have different missions and have different funding sources and et cetera, making a measurement of the quality of partnership is another one. And lastly, looking at the extent to which the system continues to change to meet emerging needs. And I'm talking both about policy and about the services and how they're coordinated and about the ways that employers can do what, as I said, St. Dominic's Hospital did and move into the lifelong learning business. So that would
And I know
be
Todd is ready to keep us on task, but I want to give Mark one quick opportunity to add a final comment.
Well, thank you. And I'll just use two examples to show you the importance of employing communications and data to link workforce development, and economic development. Because, of course, workforce development is economic development. You heard this morning Governor Bryant talk about Yokohama Tire. Let me tell you, Yokohama Tire, a major world manufacturer of tires, had committed to build their first plant outside Japan. They had narrowed their sights down to West Point, Mississippi, and a place that is not in the United States. They had it come down to one question, and the governor called me that day and asked me this question, and that was, how many chemical engineers who live within 50 miles of West Point are looking for a job? Now that was the answer to that question was going to determine whether the tire factory came to Mississippi or went outside the United States. I called Mimo Parisi. We were able to use this thing called LifeTracks, which combines a lot of data from a lot of different agencies. And we were able to, I called back the governor, and how many was it, Mimo? 10? I believe it was 10. I couldn't believe it myself. 10 chemical engineers who lived within 50 miles of West Point were looking for jobs. He told that to Yokohama Tire. They said, we're coming to West Point, Mississippi. Let me give you the second example, which actually I just learned of today. Yesterday, Hank, we added to the form that we ask employers to list on our website their job openings, we added a blank there for interns. So now that you're working on having one website that'll gather up all the interns, we can help you with that.
Great. I'd like to thank the panelists for joining me today, and now we'll move on to the next section.